What's up, guys? Welcome back to Fit Body Secrets, where my mission is to bring you guys inspiration, motivation, and a ton of tips to help y'all on your fitness journey. And tis the season, tis the week. We are into Christmas week, and it is going to be a week where calories don't count. For lack of better terms, I know y'all are looking forward to some food and festivities, and I'm going to be honest. Calorie dense food is going to be all around. And of all the times of the year, this is probably the time to be able to allow yourself to enjoy it more. Aside from like being on vacation in a really cool location where they have really cool food. But for the most part, a lot of what you're going to be exposed to this week is going to be more indulgent. And I want to talk to you guys a little bit today about really, it's like recognizing that people that are lean still enjoy eating some of those foods. They just have figured out how to obviously not put on weight while doing that. And I want to go over some strategies that you guys can use and some things to consider if you are indulging a little bit this week so that you don't feel like you have to quote unquote start over fresh at the new year. So first things first, if you get any value out of this episode or any of my episodes, please let me know. I don't even usually ask for this, but I decided to today. If you go on like Apple Podcasts, you can leave me a 5-star rating and review. That'd be great. You can obviously comment on YouTube, whatever it is, just to know that I'm giving you some value and that, or if you have questions about anything that I'm talking about. So let's get to it today. So let me just pull up my notes because I just want to make sure I start off with the right things here. Okay. So first things first, let's just talk a little bit about indulging, right? So when we talk about indulgent foods, we're not talking about bad versus good foods, because at the end of the day, when it comes down to that, there's foods that are going to be more nutrient dense. So things like, whole foods, your proteins, like your lean proteins, chicken, fish, steak, your veggies, your healthy, minimally processed fats like olive oil, nuts, and seeds. Those are all going to be really nutrient dense foods. And you want to make sure the majority of your diet, the majority of time is that, right? And then you've got those foods that are maybe high in calories. From a macronutrient perspective, your body doesn't see them any differently. So the 15 grams of sugar in your apple versus the 15 grams of sugar in your cookie are going to eventually get digested and become glucose. So your body doesn't know the difference. But because they're so void of nutrients outside of the macros, if you were only consuming those things, you would become nutrient deficient, right? But you would be getting enough calories. Does that make sense? So we want to look at finding that balance. And when we think about the holiday week, right? A holiday week like Christmas, you're probably going to have more indulgent foods this week than you have the rest of the year, right? Like it's a very small percentage of your overall whole year. So don't get so hung up in this like, oh my God, I'm being so bad right now. Just understand that the foods that you're eating are likely higher in calories, more dense, and smaller in volume than your normal routine. That's it. But this is why calorie awareness is so important. I'm not telling you to track your food on Christmas, but I am telling you to build some awareness around the amount of calories in whatever foods you are consuming. And that might mean looking up the nutrition facts for something that you're having on Christmas just to get yourself an understanding of those types of things. So calorie awareness is really important. In fact, last week, I made an Instagram reel on this because I had a crumble cookie and I was comparing the nutrition facts of the crumble cookie to a store-bought Lenny and Larry's cookie. And the funny findings were that the crumble cookie and the Lenny and Larry's cookie were comparatively about equal in calories. Now, obviously the Lenny and Larry's cookie is going to be a lot less sugar, a little bit more fiber, a little bit more protein. So I'm getting different macronutrients from it. But from a caloric perspective and controlling my weight, it wouldn't have really mattered. And sometimes the person needs to say okay to the real thing. Like this week, I wouldn't want you eating a Lenny and Larry's cookie for your Christmas dessert. Okay, so let's make sure that we understand that calories do matter. And if the majority of your food is coming from, good sources, then taking a couple of days and enjoying those foods is not going to hurt you. Now, you're probably going to be eating more calories because, like I said, they're more calorie dense. So you're going to want bigger portions of a higher calorie food. So when you typically would just have like a cup of rice, which might be 200 calories, your sides on Christmas dinner might equal 1,000 calories, right? So you're going to be eating a lot more calories. And this is where the second piece of this is going to come into play. All right. You need to understand what it looks like to be a healthy eater. Healthy eating is not what you eat. It's actually what you think about what you eat and your nutrition habits and how those things make you feel on a daily basis, right? So if your eating habits leave you feeling guilty, frustrated, bloated, gross, all of these things, probably not the healthiest eating behaviors, right? On Christmas, Thanksgiving, and all that stuff, you should be able to indulge in foods, but not end up feeling so full and sick that like you don't want to move, or like that you have to make up for it, like, with like going on a restrictive diet. We're going to talk about some strategies today, which are going to sound similar to this, but I want you to think about the perception. All right. The healthy habits is that like when you're healthy eating is truly like being able to enjoy food without stress and knowing that you're getting enough nutrients. Like that's kind of you want to have that blend of like the whole foods, getting enough, but also like being able to have a meal that's not stressing about it. Right. So you need to have a healthy mindset around nutrition. And you also need to have that calorie awareness that I already mentioned. If you have those two things, now you have control. All right. So if you're somebody that's like, nope, that's definitely not me. Like I know that I overeat and then I like feel guilty about it. And it either spirals me and I just can't get back on track, or I restrict myself for days and then I do it again. Like if you're in those two places, we got to work on the relationship first. And this strategy might actually help you a little bit. So let's get into it. Diet Sunkissed. Amazing. All right. First and foremost, let's just say you indulged a little bit. What should you do the next day? Especially when it comes to food. All right. So first things first is let's just start by listening to your appetite, especially if you don't have a healthy relationship with food. What is your body actually telling you? Because honestly, sometimes after over consuming food, you might not be that hungry. You might actually just like not be that hungry when you wake up. And that's okay. It's not going to be the end of the world. Vice versa, you might still be hungry the next morning. That's also okay. Like, listen to your appetite. You don't want to force something against what your body is telling you, because sometimes that can actually be a negative and end up leading you down the wrong path. So if you're actually waking up hungry and you're like telling yourself you shouldn't eat, you're likely just going to make that cycle worse, because most of the time later on in the day, you're going to end up overcompensating for missing in the morning, even if you did overindulge the next day. So you got to kind of honor your appetite a little bit. I don't want you force feeding yourself after you've overindulged, but I also don't want you feeling like you have to completely ignore your appetite to compensate for it. Okay, that's a really important thing to do. Now let's talk about two tactics that you can use. I want to start by prefacing this by saying you need to understand the logic and science behind weight. Okay, how our body weight changes, whether we're looking to lose weight, how we gain weight, how we maintain. It all comes down to a calorie equation. If I'm eating too many calories over time, my weight is going to trend up. So if I'm eating in a calorie surplus, eating more than my body needs, my body is going to trend up. My body is going to trend up. If I'm eating less than my body needs over time, my weight will continue to trend down. If it's averaging out, I will stay the same. That doesn't happen in a day or two. You would have to consume a shit ton of calories for that to happen in a day or two. Okay, I'm talking like 5,000 calories plus for most people. Okay, so recognize that you have to be constantly overeating for time in order for you to gain weight. Okay, so if you have 1 or 2 days, you don't really have to do anything. You will maintain your weight just fine if you just get back to your normal routine. You don't have to change anything. If you are somebody who is in a fat loss phase and maybe you have, more social things coming up, or you have multiple parties, understand that calorie equation is going to give you a little bit more control. Okay. And here's why. Let's just say your caloric needs are around 2,000 calories a day. We'll call it that just because it's an even number. All right. If one day you consumed 4,000 calories, which is 2,000 calories over your needs for maintenance, okay, if you would like to make sure that you're not storing that as fat, and you decide for the next 5 days to cut down to 1,500, okay, you're going to go ahead and compensate for that lack of that higher calorie day. And I started this by saying you have to have a healthy relationship with food, because this isn't about like binging and restricting. It's simply understanding that you get to figure out how you want to spend your calorie budget. Okay. And that strategy right there will help you understand how to do that. Now, if you're just guessing, like if you're like, I have no idea how much I eat, I'm just going to cut my calories for a week, you're not going to get anywhere. In fact, that was me for a long time. I would binge on a day or two, and then for 3 or 4 days, I would restrict myself, and I was gaining weight because I wasn't realizing how much I was consuming on that day. And the days that I was trying to restrict myself, I wasn't counting. I was just guesstimating. So keeping a food diary and watching your trends is the easiest thing. You can totally do that. The other thing you can do is, if you're like, I really don't want to eat less, is you can move a little bit more. And I would call both of these things compensatory behaviors. So yes, you are compensating for over consuming calories. This isn't a punishment, though. This isn't you punishing yourself for your poor food choices. It's literally just saying, I spent a little too much money at Louis Vuitton this weekend, so I'm going to be a little cheaper this week. That's essentially all you're doing with your food. And this can obviously be taken to extremes and become a binge restrict pattern or be a disordered eating thought. However, it doesn't have to be, as long as you recognize that you're just controlling things. That's it. Okay. So that's why I call it calorie cycling. People talk about carb cycling and all this stuff. That shit is stupid. Okay. Like at the end of the day, carb cycling is really calorie cycling. You know, most people aren't you don't need to carb, like changing your carbs and fats really isn't going to do much aside from maybe give you a little bit less glucose one day. But calorie cycling, very impactful and effective. In fact, like maybe you've been on vacation for a week, and like you can guess you are maybe consuming 3,000 to 4,000 calories all week. I wouldn't tell you to drastically cut your calories the next week to like 1,500, but if before vacation you were eating 2,000 calories, you might want to just maybe go to like 1,800 for a week. Put yourself in a little bit more of a deficit to offset things, So, this is where it's like so important to have an understanding of what's going in. Okay. So all of this to tell you guys that if you are somebody who wants to have control over your nutrition and you are going to indulge a little bit, it's okay to actually eat a little bit less in the days following it, or the days leading up to, whichever you want to do. I'd say the days following is probably better. I'd rather you have the energy stores so that your workouts feel awesome, and then you can kind of obviously add things back in as the week tapers off. But you got to have control. You got to start with having a food diary. You got to start with understanding what your caloric needs are and being consistent with that stuff. That's going to help you so much. So I'm not sure if you needed to hear this today, but it's okay to do that stuff as long as you have a healthy relationship with food and you understand the science behind weight control, which is those are the two things that I want all of my clients to have. The last piece I will talk about on this is not to completely avoid or neglect the scale during this process. You are going to see that after an indulgent day, your weight's going to be up. It's water, it's food, it's all of the things that's not fat. It takes time for your body to create new adipose tissue or to fill those fat cells. So understand that initial weight is going to start to drop off pretty quickly. The calories that you're changing is just ensuring that the next week you're back down to your usual weight. All right. Because what typically will happen is if you are somebody who overindulges on a regular basis and you maybe just like cut calories a little bit for a couple of days, what happens is like usually like midweek is your low. And over time, like your weight will spike on Monday and then it'll come back down a little bit. But that low in the middle week starts to get a little higher, a little higher, and a little higher. And then over time, you end up gaining weight. And that's the stuff that I want to start to kind of like help you guys tease out. So if you are somebody who needs a little bit of help with your nutrition, especially with this kinds of stuff, you need to make sure that you got the basics covered first. All right. So let's make sure that you're already comfortable keeping a food diary, that you're comfortable knowing how many calories your body needs. You know what phase you're in, whether you are in maintenance mode, whether you are in fat loss mode, whatever method or like whatever phase you're in. This way, you know how to apply this. This is a more advanced strategy for people that have already covered the basics. If you haven't covered the basics, start there. And I guess I'll add one more thing to this that I already said in the beginning. Reminding yourself that you don't have to make up. You don't have to make up for overindulging a couple of days. If that happens, especially around Christmas, it is totally fine. You have no reason to feel like you have to compensate. But if you are somebody who does stress about this kinds of stuff and you want to be able to indulge in some of the food and stick to your goals, you can definitely use these strategies. Hopefully this was helpful for y'all, and have a Merry Christmas.